Once upon a time, there was a young girl named Rosie who was afraid of everything. She was afraid of the dark. She was afraid of spiders. She was even afraid of her own shadow. Rosie's fear made her life very difficult. One day, Rosie was walking home from school when she saw a group of older kids, bullies, a smaller kid. Rosie knew she should do something, but she was too afraid. She stood there and watched as the older kids pushed and shoved the smaller kid. Suddenly, the smaller kid turned and looked at Rosie. He had big, sad eyes. Rosie felt a pain of guilt. She knew she had to do something. Rosie took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Leave him alone!" she shouted. The older kids were surprised to see Rosie standing up to them. They had never seen her stand up for herself before. "What are you going to do about it?" one of the older kids asked. "I'm not going to let you bully him," Rosie said. The older kids laughed. "What are you going to do about it?" they asked again. Rosie didn't know what to do. She was still afraid, but she didn't want to back down. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When Rosie opened her eyes, she saw something strange. The older kids were gone, and the smaller kid was gone too. Rosie looked around, confused. She didn't know what had just happened. Then Rosie heard a voice. "Don't be afraid," the voice said. Rosie turned around and saw a wise old woman standing behind her. "Who are you?" Rosie asked. "I am the spirit of courage," the old woman said. "I am here to help you overcome your fear." "But how?" Rosie asked. "You must face your fears head-on," the old woman said. "The only way to conquer your fear is to face it." Rosie took a deep breath. "I'm ready," she said. The old woman smiled. "Then let us begin," she said. The old woman led Rosie to a dark forest. "This is the forest of fear," the old woman said. "Inside this forest, you will find all of your worst fears." Rosie was scared, but she knew she had to face her fears. She stepped into the forest. Rosie walked through the forest for hours. She saw all of her worst fears: spiders, snakes, the dark, and even her own shadow. But Rosie didn't back down. She faced each of her fears head-on. Finally, Rosie reached the center of the forest. There, she saw a large mirror. Rosie walked up to the mirror and looked at herself. She saw a brave and courageous girl. She was no longer afraid. Rosie smiled. "Thank you," she said to the old woman. The old woman smiled back. "You're welcome," she said. "You have now conquered your fear." Rosie turned and walked out of the forest. She was no longer afraid of anything. Rosie went back to school the next day and told her classmates about her experience in the forest of fear. Her classmates were impressed by her courage. Rosie's story inspired her classmates to face their own fears. One classmate was afraid of public speaking, but after hearing Rosie's story, she signed up for the school play. Another classmate was afraid of heights, but after hearing Rosie's story, he went on a field trip to a mountaintop observatory. Rosie's story made a difference in the lives of her classmates. It taught them that they are capable of overcoming anything they set their minds to. Fear is a normal human emotion, but we should not let fear control our lives. We should face our fears head-on and overcome them, just like Rosie did.